So how does a brand that nobody's ever heard of overtake the most hyped water bottle in America? So to answer that, we actually have to go back to when Stanley was basically a dead brand. So Stanley was this 110-year-old brand, and for the most part, nobody was really talking about them. They were mostly selling thermoses to outdoorsmen, hunters, construction workers, campers, these type of people. For most of its history, it wasn't really a lifestyle or a fashion brand. That is, until 2020 happened. See, Stanley was already a big brand, but it wasn't a hot brand. And then three moms in Utah who ran a blog called The Buy Guide, they discovered the quencher and they started to evangelize it. It was completely organic. They genuinely just loved the product so much and figured out that it was actually pretty useful as a mom. And so eventually, they buy a whole bunch of cups wholesale, trying to sell them to their own audience. 5 days later, they sell out. Then they order another 5,000 and they sell out again, this time within an hour. Of course, Stanley notices this. See, Stanley had hired Terrence Riley as CMO, who later became president. But what's funny is that he was actually the same marketer who engineered the whole Crocs comeback. The guy that took them from ugly shoe to essentially this hot social media buzz machine. That kind of tells you where this story is going. See, at this point, Stanley picks up on what's happening and they decide to make a pivot. They essentially abandon their old core customer, at least from a marketing perspective, and they chase this new one. Suburban women, roughly 25 to 45, but into aesthetics and lifestyle. See, they lock onto the insight that most millennials at this point are just buying based off vibes. So they leaned into limit color drops, holiday exclusive and retailer exclusive colorways. See, nothing about the cup itself changed. There was no really new innovation, but color became the innovation strategy. And this is kind of where the craziness starts to happen. So there is a woman who sets her alarm at 4 a.m. She drives to a Target parking lot in the dark, sits in a folding chair for 3 hours before the doors even open for a pink cup. When the doors finally do open, people storm inside, grown adults sprinting down the aisles, grabbing whatever pink that they could find, some of them literally jumping over displays to get there first. And by the time that the sun comes out, it was already on eBay for $200. See, people were doing crazy things for these cups. I remember my wife Stanley actually got stolen out of her locker at a hot springs we were at. It was insane. But of course, the strategy was always pretty simple. A new color equals a reason to post, film, collect, and buy again. It was a rinse and repeat formula that just absolutely worked beautifully. But just when you thought that they were at their peak, two things happened that launched Stanley into the stratosphere. First, WaterTok. So a TikTok trend where people film these elaborate water recipes inside their Stanley cups. Drink mixes, flavored syrups, garnishes, fancy ice. They were turning something as simple as drinking water into an aesthetic lifestyle ritual. It created an entire genre of content for them that helped them fuel this hype that they were already building on. And then a girl named Danielle. On a totally normal Wednesday, her car burns to the ground. Everything inside is gone. Seats are gone. Steering wheel is melted. The whole interior is just ash and black. And then she opens the door the next day to kind of assess the damages. And sitting in the cup holder happens to be an untouched Stanley cup. She picks it up, shakes it. You can hear the ice still clinking inside. That video did 84 million views. But then 2 days later, the president of Stanley makes what is probably one of the smartest marketing decisions a brand has ever made at that time. See, he sets up his phone on a tripod, films a simple video on his phone saying,
"We've never done this before, and we'll probably never do it again, but we'd love to replace your vehicle."
32 million views and roughly 100 million impressions. It's the kind of thing that brands dream about. See, brands already spend an enormous amount on marketing campaigns. They'll happily pay creators $20,000 to $30,000 for one single TikTok video. So spending $40,000 to $60,000 replacing a car was probably one of the highest ROI marketing campaigns that they could have possibly ever ran. And so from there, you can imagine the revenue jumps from about 75 million to around 750 million by 2023. But a lot of people still had questions. Was it real? Because a YouTuber recreated the exact scenario in his backyard. It was the same cup, the same type of fire, and his cup didn't survive. Which means either Danielle's fire behaved completely different or there's something off about the story. See, did she get paid? Was it a stunt? The world may never know. It was never confirmed or denied. But here's the thing, regardless of whether it was staged or not, Stanley's response was fast, it was human, and it looked generous. Keyword, looked generous. See, that's the exact recipe for a viral video. That's the type of thing that makes you want to share it with other people. That makes you want to say, yo, look at this. But what I find funny is that they never even changed the product. It was the same product that they've always been selling. The only thing that really changed was the audience and the vibes that they were selling. They just simply switched who the product was for. They weaponized scarcity and then they just let people do the rest. That was like the entire strategy. There is a lesson though. Sometimes abandoning your most obvious customer for an unexpected one can be the single best decision a brand makes. And on top of that, using scarcity and color as your innovation strategy is probably the cheapest way to drive demand for your product, for a little bit at least. The former CMO basically proved that he could run the same playbook twice. But of course, what goes up must come down. So it turns out that there were lead pellets sealed inside the base of the cup as part of like a manufacturing process or whatever. It wasn't really that dangerous under normal use, but people were going crazy about it over the internet. But the damage had already been done. More importantly, it gave people an excuse to leave. Specifically millennials. See, they were the Stanley people, and the Stanley Cup had become overhyped. It was over-owned. Everyone had one. People started calling Stanley owners basic. And see, the thing about scarcity is that it only works when something is actually scarce. Once everybody owns one, it kind of loses its identity value. The moment that you can find one on sale at a TJ Maxx, you know that it's overstocked. But of course, people need a reason to move on. And the lead story gave people that. I mean, they stopped buying Stanley, some stopped using them altogether. It gave millennials permission to jump ship to whatever Gen Z was already using. See, what you have to understand is that Gen Z has spent years watching millennials lose their mind over a single cup. The camping outside of Target, the Starbucks stampede or whatever, they were just simply over it. And instead, they wanted something that felt like their thing. And so that taps into something that's called the big brother, little brother theory, which is very simple. The older generation kind of determines what's cool. And the younger generation first copies them because that's how they build their sense of identity. But eventually, as they grow up, they want their own sense of identity. And so the very thing that the older generation likes becomes uncool to them. So instead, they go and search for something more niche, something more underground, something that belongs to them. And that's exactly what happened. And this isn't even the first time that something like this has happened. Visco girls made Hydro Flask the thing, millennial moms made Stanley the thing, and now Gen Z is making Owala the thing. And in a different category, it's the same reason why New Balance had the dad shoe come back. But anyways, here's where Owala comes into all of this. So Owala was founded in 2020 by the same founder behind the blender bottle. They had already this deep experience in drinkware engineering. Innovation kind of had always been part of the DNA. But for the first few years, hardly anyone knew that they even existed. So how did they truly come in and eat Stanley's lunch? I mean, Gen Z had a lot to do with it, but what it really was this. See, they never tried to manufacture hype. Their biggest innovation was the FreeSip spout. One lid, 2 ways to drink, a straw for sipping, wide opening for chugging the water if you wanted to. It was a tiny little feature, but it solved an annoyance that a lot of people were already experiencing with their cups, including Stanley. And on top of that, Stanley bottles were already known for leaking. I mean, you could really only just sip out of them, and if you wanted to chug, you'd probably have to take the lid off. Owala was quietly solving these actual problems that Stanley was just ignoring because Stanley had become so focused on colors. But what's interesting though, is that Owala quietly overtook Stanley as America's best-selling water bottle in 2023 while Stanley was still at its peak. See, while Stanley was being high off of being at its highest, Owala was leveraging the most powerful marketing vehicle since the beginning of time, word of mouth. See, Owala didn't rely on celebrity endorsements or big influencers. Instead, they relied heavily on everyday people. Half of their content came from organic UGC creators that just genuinely vibed with the product. And because of that, these creators helped shape and position the perspective that people had on Owala. See, Owala became the smarter, more logical choice than over Stanley, Yeti, or even Hydro Flask. And so you would think that Stanley being bigger and bigger and bigger would actually be a bad thing for Owala. It actually was one of the biggest benefits for them because Stanley becoming bigger meant it was more basic and more overhyped. And so Owala storytelling was mainly only product-led. The content was entirely centered around the feature. And yeah, I mean, you would hear a lot of people in marketing say, including me, I've said this, sell the feeling, don't sell the feature. But read the room. When there's already a brand selling the feeling and extracting every single penny out of it, people eventually get tired of it. And sometimes, if your feature solves a real pain point, a real problem that people have, that is actually stronger than any aspirational lifestyle marketing campaign because it's demonstratable. You can see it happening. Someone can show you why it's better. I remember we were a few rounds deep into a game of Catan, and my friend reaches into her bag, pulls out her water bottle, and it turns out it was an Owala. Somebody in her group asked, "What is that?" And without any hesitation, she flips the top open, shows us the straw, snaps it shut, tips it sideways, chugs straight from it. She was acting like she worked for the company, even though she had nothing to do with the company, and she just showed us like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And then she goes, "Oh, and it doesn't leak like the Stanley." That is what I mean by product-led storytelling. Customers become your salespeople. This is the kind of part where I'm supposed to tell you that the better product always wins. Except Owala eventually did the exact same thing as Stanley. Lifestyle branding, Gen Z creators, aesthetic drops. The difference was, though, that Owala didn't need the hype to get in through the door. The product is what got him through the door, and the hype just helped them stay there. From there, they simply converted an audience that was all ready to jump ship. The lead story gave Stanley people permission to switch. See, choosing Owala at this point was more than just picking a water bottle. It was also saying you weren't about the hype anymore. You were over the whole hype and being basic. And so while Owala looks like an underdog story, it actually isn't. It's more like a specialist drinkware company with years of engineering experience that walked right through the door that Stanley left wide open. See, while Stanley innovated colors, Owala innovated functionality, and that is how they disrupted the category. They simply solved the problems customer actually had. So how does a brand that nobody's ever heard of overtake the most hyped water bottle in America? They make a better product while the other one is busy making vibes their product. If you want more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe.